Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network, and today's topic is finding freedom. And we're going to talk about the hero's journey, really, the journey of letting go of who we believe ourselves to be so we can become more fully who we truly are. So before we get involved in that conversation, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together and vigorously rub your hands together to feel the tickling, the tingling, the pressure, the temperature, and all those sensations that can bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Rosalind. Good morning, everybody who's joining us. It's great to be here with you. And today we're talking about finding freedom. And it's interesting because I was talking to, I'm in the process of reviewing clients for the next cohort of the Core Connection work, which starts the first week of February. So if you're interested, now's the time to be in touch to experience a sample session to see if it's a good fit, and to determine if you might want to be part of the program. If you're interested in it, it is by invitation only. It's usually through referral. So it's kind of a boutique kind of practice. But you can learn more about it on my website at yourcoreconnection.com. And I'm intending to get the enrollments filled by the end of the month. So if you're interested, now's the time to check it out. Anyway, I was talking to someone who is going to be a new client, and they really get it. They really get it. They said, we were talking about intentions and what they would be desiring as a result, what they're looking for out of the program. And I started talking about freedom, and that the work is really about freedom, which means letting go of the things that are blocking us from our fullest expression. And this person said, who would I be without my blocks? And I said, exactly. And they said, it's terrifying. And I said, exactly. And it's so interesting because I see this happening with clients where it almost becomes a game sometimes to see if they can run out the clock before we do the Core Connection work, because on some level, whatever it is that is trying to hold those blocks in place knows that this work will dissolve them. And it's kind of like the blocks are fighting for survival, like they're gonna stick in there as long as they can. And we often, experience the world through, well, we do experience the world through the lens of those blocks or limitations. And to be able to conceive of what we could be if we were fully expressed is really daunting and frightening in a way that it just calls us to another level of being. So Rosalind says, a form of self-love. How about when people label freedom as being selfish? Or label selfishness as being freedom, right? I mean, it can go both ways. I think freedom is an inside job to a great degree, primarily, that it's actually an experience of wholeness. And Rosalind says, is freedom giving self permission when we don't need other people to validate our actions? Well, I think that that's certainly part of freedom. I think the freedom that I'm talking about is freedom from our learned limitations, our learned constrictions, not just social constraints, but social constraints too, to a certain degree, but our self-imposed constrictions. So I had a session with a client yesterday on body image. So, here we are talking about freedom. Well, in our culture, in the United States, there are certain body images that are revered and others that are degraded, right? We're supposed to be fit and thin and young and have, just have certain appearance in order to be socially revered. For there's this really crazy image that we're supposed to live up to look like gods and goddesses somehow. And if we don't look like that, then we're kind of conditioned to think that there's something wrong with us or that we're less than somehow. So Rosalind says, freedom being able to pause rather than being reactive to a conditioned pattern. Exactly. That's a big part of freedom, is not being subject to reactive patterns. That's really the freedom that I'm talking about. And so in this example, this woman is a big woman, and big people in our culture are trained to self-judgment and even self-hatred, just self-disgust or despising oneself. If if you don't look this certain way, there's, you're less than. And how could anybody be attracted to you? Or how could anybody love you if you don't meet this appearance, for example? And we did this session. And so, initially there was embarrassment and frustration because, the body image wasn't matching up to this ideal. And there was a whole bunch sadness, a whole bunch of other emotions. And what the result of the session, it was so awesome, because there was some embarrassment afterwards, but it wasn't because of the appearance of the body. It was because of not having that sense of self-nurturance and self-love and self-acceptance. It was very amazing, because what came up was, what about gratitude for this wonderful body? And maybe this is the shape of the body that you're meant to have. And there are all different shaped bodies on the planet, and we all get to inhabit and appreciate the bodies that we have for what they provide us, that they're all our unique vessels. And it was so beautiful to see this self-judgment turn into self-love, which is what you're addressing here, Rosalind. So, that's a freedom. It's a freedom to be able to be, and to be accepting of oneself, and to be present to to gratitude even, and joy, appreciation, to be inhabiting one's body instead of trying to escape it or judging it or brutalizing it in one way or another. And body image is a very, very big issue for so many people, because there's so much social stigma around not being this ideal sort of appearance, where people are judging all the time, and we judge ourselves as well. So Rosalind says, if a person's legs become disabled, how can one still feel freedom? To a degree, we identify with our bodies and their containers that will change. So it's true that if one's legs become disabled, that we have less mobility, that, at least autonomous mobility through our legs. And our sense of innate freedom, our freedom of spirit, doesn't necessarily have to suffer. It is possible to feel free even if our body can't move. Feeling free is a state of being. It doesn't need to be contingent upon external circumstances. And in fact, that's one of the foundations of freedom, is to not have our well-being dependent upon external circumstances. So, because if our well-being, our sense of well-being, our sense of freedom is dependent upon external circumstances, then it's volatile. It can be taken away from us. Whereas there's a state of, or a state of being that can transcend circumstance. Now, I'm not saying it's easy to get there. The path to freedom is the hero's journey. It's not that it's easy to find that space of freedom. We create all kinds of oppressions for ourselves and each other, for that matter, through our beliefs, through the stories that we tell ourselves. And by the way, if y'all are wanting to join our conversation and you're putting in comments and I'm not responding, please go to the Enlightened World Network Facebook page or YouTube channel, and you can put your comments in there and I will respond if I see your comments. So Rosalind says, so then freedom is associating ways in which the heart is referenced. I love that way of speaking it, Rosalind. I think freedom is being present to our core being in alignment with ourselves, being present to our heart being present to being present. Ultimately, pure presence is what I'm talking about as freedom. That's really what I'm talking about, is allowing all the impediments to that freedom to fall away. Impediments to that freedom being limiting beliefs, limiting patterns, ideas that constrain us to the past, or obsess with the future. So anything that is keeping us from being in this moment is constraining or bounding our freedom. And I think that our fullest expression, or building our capacity for our fullest expression, is freeing ourselves from these artificial constraints of what we're capable of. For instance, to say things like, I'm not smart enough, I'm not young enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not whatever it is, to do this, that, or the other thing, or to be this, that, or the other thing. I haven't heard it for a while, but I remember conversations where people have said, well, I really would like to do that, but I'm too old. And, it's interesting because age, we do have physical constraints, and often those physical constraints aren't as extreme as we might perceive them to be. Like, they might be overcomable, but I remember somebody at 42 telling me they were too old for this or that or the other thing. And I was like, what are you kidding me? 42, you're too old. That, like, I went back to school at 40. And I'm going to go learn how to build dome houses at 65. Like, it's crazy. What do you mean you're too old? This is so much a state of mind. And I think that we give up on ourselves. We give up on our dreams. We give up on ourselves. We give up on our lives because of social norms, or expectations that are either imposed, that may be imposed upon us, but that we have accepted in some way or another, right? It's terrifying in a way to step outside of those constraints, because then we don't know what the limits are. We don't know what the possibility is. And I am constantly amazed at how people will choose a limitation because it's familiar. They'll recreate a limitation because it's familiar, even if it's painful, rather than step into the unknown and the unfamiliar that feels so much better because it's unknown, or it's not as familiar. It's crazy. It's like the devil you know is better than the devil you don't, or better than the angel you don't. And if we look at that, if we step back to look at that, that's pretty crazy, right? That we'll say, okay, I'm comfortable in my nice little box. Even if I'm not comfortable in my nice little box, at least I know what my nice little box is, so I don't have to step outside it. And I'm reminded of the story about how to train fleas. And I don't think that this is a true story, but the idea is you put the fleas in a jar and you put a lid on the jar, and they jump and they hit the lid, and they jump and they hit the lid, and they jump and they hit the lid, and then they start jumping not quite as high as the lid so they don't hit the lid. And then you can take off the lid because that's as high as they're going to jump, because they've learned that that's where the lid is and they didn't like bumping into it. So now you've trained them to stay inside the jar, and most of us are like fleas in the jar. We stay within the constraints rather than literally thinking outside the box. And what does it look like to think outside the box? How do we even begin to do that when our structures are built of boxes, right? How do we begin to think outside the constraints that have governed our way of thinking and being? And I think that this is, I'm in the process of developing a group coaching program that hopefully I'm going to launch in February. And I believe I'm going to call it Living into the Emerging Future, and or Tools for Living into the Emergent Future. I'm not sure. And one of the things that we're going to be looking at is, how do we actually come up with new thought? How do we truly begin to think outside the box? How do we truly generate creative expression and new solutions, or new directions, new possibilities? How do we create from the space of potential rather than being a response to problems? So Rosalind says, great title. We start down the path to alleviate our own suffering. Exactly. As boundaries begin to dissolve, freedom becomes more inseparable. Without realizing it, we begin expressing outwardly and make peace with those boundaries. So boundaries can begin to dissolve, or we can find that they're not real, and so we allow ourselves to go beyond them. But I think maybe recognizing them begins to, or allows us to begin to interact with them in a different way that opens the door for possible freedom, where we can challenge the existing notion of things, to say, well, what might be possible? What's actually possible beyond that? So we look at that with, for instance, legislation around environmental issues, or legislation that is there to try and correct some social issues. The challenge about that, or the problem with that, is that it's kind of a game of whack-a-mole, because it's looking at the symptom and not the foundation, and with kind of trying to build some kind of armature on top of a faulty foundation or a structure that's already faulty to begin with. And so what we need to do is to reconceptualize those foundations. And what does that look like? I mean, it's so interesting. I have had conversations with people who are in the social justice and equality space. And in those conversations, we're talking about trying to promote social justice. The thing is, we don't have an experience of it. We don't have a reference point for true social justice. It hasn't existed yet. And the thing is that in many cases, the folks that are working toward creating that aren't recognizing that they need to conceptualize it first. Like, what's it going to look like? Because we don't have a model for it. So, let's see. Rosalind says, thank you, Mira, for these weekday insights, providing tools for the emergent future. What was the title of the group called? It's either Living into the Emergent Future or Tools for Living into the Emergent Future. I think it's going to be once a week for 2 hours for 3 months. So February, March, April. And I don't know what the price point is yet. I don't know what day of the week I want it to be yet. But that's kind of the plan. It's getting shaped as we speak. And the intention, I'm sort of formulating the intention of it, but one of the intentions is to learn to be thinking creatively, to be learning to generate new, to be generating from potential and possibility rather than through reaction to existing limits. So yeah, that's what we're talking about, is living into the future rather than from the past. Anyway, thank you for your engagement. It's always such a pleasure to be here with you, and I'm so grateful. And until next time, I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network, EWN One with the Earth, and Enlightened World Living. And Rosalind says, surviving to thriving. Exactly. So until next time, so much love to you. And